All right, welcome to the Krueger Show, everybody, as we get things rolling on July the 6th, 2023, 2:05 on the West Coast, 5:05 on the East Coast. Hope everybody's having a phenomenal early July. 4th of July just came and went. We're still hearing explosions around the Bay Area. People had a heavy arsenal of fireworks that are still going off the last couple nights, but welcome to the Krueger Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. More on them in a bit. But we welcome in Dave Lombardi, who we've known for years and years. Dave actually was kind enough to join me during my Stanford pregame days at KMBR on Saturdays, and I was looking for somebody who knew Stanford football like the back of their hand, and somehow we hooked up. And Dave, let me just thank you now for many Stanford pregame shows of segments that we've done together. Those were easily the hardest shows to prepare for because, one, you're in a field by yourself, but two, how much do you know about Stanford's walk-ons and, Stanford football overall?
I knew way too much about those walk-ons.
You did know a lot. But I'll say for me personally, that was, like people say, oh, man, do you get nervous? I never get nervous doing Niners because I know it like the back of my hand. But if I've got to talk about something for a couple hours and I don't know a lot about it, that's when prep comes into it. And anyway, I really did appreciate all those years you joining me on those shows. You're coming back from your honeymoon in Africa in the Middle East. Good to see you, man. How was it? Was it a good trip? And congratulations on the nuptials.
Yeah, thank you. We delayed the honeymoon by a couple months because we had to squeeze the wedding in May right after the draft, and then OTAs happened. But now is the dead period. Right now is when really nothing's happening. So we decided to just do it right, and we went all the way out to Africa. Tanzania, did a safari on the Serengeti Plain, made famous by the movie Lion King. That was on the Serengeti. And then we went out to Zanzibar, which is also part of Tanzania, but it's an island off the coast of Africa. And I got to see the Indian Ocean for the first time. And it was just those turquoise waters, which was really nice. And then on the way home, because it's really hard to get from Zanzibar to anywhere, it's best to go a little bit backwards. So we went one time zone backwards and we went to Dubai. And
nice.
Had a drink up in the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. And then, they have this big dispute in Dubai over who has the tallest infinity pool. So we went to the tallest infinity pool period one day, and this hotel is really proud of it. It was really cool. And then the next day we went to the tallest 360-degree infinity pool because it wraps around 360. So that one was a bit shorter, but as opposed to the one the day before, it was 360 degrees all around. And then we went out to the desert, and it was 108 degrees with humidity, but it was awesome. Had maybe one of the best meals of my life at this one settlement in the desert out there in Arabia. It was, these guys at the settlement were barbecuing, and it was awesome. Hummus and lamb. The lamb was awesome. So just a really, really cool trip, seeing two different continents, right? Africa and then Asia, the Middle East part of Asia before we went home.
Did anybody come up to you and say, you're Dave Lombardi who covers the 49ers? I watch you on YouTube.
Yeah, once. On one of the planes, I forgot where, in one of the airports. It was cooler. We were, a few weeks before that, we were in Europe. We were in Prague because my mom's side of the family is from the Czech Republic. So we did a little wedding celebration there, and it happened more often in Prague. So you have this, the 49ers have this worldwide following, which I think is really cool. Sometimes when I'm doing a show or I'm on Twitter or wherever, I'll just randomly blurt out, who's awake right now? What time is it? And you get like people from all over the world, because it's not only a national following, it's a worldwide following. And I think that just speaks to the Bay Area, how diverse it is. And you have, it also speaks to how good the Niners were in the 80s and the 90s. But I think that people from the Bay Area are very likely to be in a lot of different places in the world. So it's pretty neat when you run into Niners fans on a different continent.
Yeah, I mean, it's an iconic brand built largely by Joe Montana, Steve Young, Jerry Rice, and when you're a dominant team for 20 years, people love a winner, right? And they get aboard, and so the Niners have this global popularity. You see it when they travel internationally. I mean, you were in Mexico City, right, for Niners Cardinals. According to reports, that was like 90% Niner fans in that.
It was crazy. And, I will say to this day, that was the loudest a stadium has ever been in favor of the 49ers. And I'll explain why. Because you have an overhang at Estadio Azteca right over the crowd. And that really, it's the Seattle effect, right? The reason that Seattle Stadium is so loud is because the rain overhang creates this parabolic sound effect that reverberates the sound back down on the field. So it makes it louder than it would be if it was just an open air stadium. So anyway, you had a 49ers crowd, and it was 90%, maybe even 95% 49ers, because they're the team of the 80s. And the way it works in Mexico is team of the 70s, the Steelers. There's a lot of Steelers fans down there, a lot of Niners fans from the 80s. The people who grew up in the 90s are Cowboys fans. And then I think a lot of Patriots fans after that. But anyway, 95% 49ers fans in a stadium with an overhang. When has that ever happened before? It's never happened before. And it was ear-splitting loud when the 49ers did something good on third down. So I will maintain that's the loudest the 49ers crowd has ever been.
Wow. I wouldn't doubt it. Overseas Niners is watching from England right now, just after 10 p.m. for your information. So there you go. Overseas Niner. Good to see you. Thanks for joining the Krueger Show with Dave Lombardi, our guest star today. Let's get in on the Niners because, man, we're 3 weeks away from veterans reporting to camp for the 2023 season. And let's just start with, what do you think? Maybe it's a two-parter. What do you think the Niners' primary concern is going into this season? What's your primary concern for them going into this year?
Well, let's just push aside the quarterback situation for a moment. That's always going to be a concern. I think they've done what they can to insulate it with options, but let's look at the other positions because I don't think that people talk enough about the other positions. I think the roster is amazing along the front lines, right? I think the first string of this roster is the best that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have fielded since they came aboard in 2017. But there are a couple areas where depth is a question. And I think along the offensive line, especially on the exterior, they obviously lost the starter, Mike McGlinchey. They believe a lot in Colton McKivitz at right tackle. But my biggest questions are what happens beyond Colton McKivitz, because we know from experience that it takes more than just 5 starting offensive linemen or starting caliber offensive linemen to win a Super Bowl. You're going to have at least 7, preferably 8. The 49ers have played 20 games in each of the past 2 seasons, and they've had to dig deep into that bullpen of O-linemen. So is Jalen Moore going to step up here during training camp? Are they going to see a little bit more out of him to become a good swing tackle? Is Matt Pryor, the veteran who they signed, who used to play for Indianapolis, is he going to be a legit option? Leroy Watson is a guy who was a tight end in college with Spencer Burford at San Antonio just 2 years ago. He's put on a ton of weight. He's 310 now. He might still be a year away on that developmental track, but he's another option there. Are they going to sign somebody? I don't know. Tom Compton's probably still out there, but we know he's not very good. It's one of those things where if the worst case scenario comes true for the 49ers and Colton McKivitz doesn't play quite as well as they hope he can, and he gets hurt again, and then it goes to the depth, you're just not sure what they have. So that depth along the offensive line has to prove itself. And in a similar fashion, the depth at cornerback has to prove itself. Because I really like how Deommodore Lenoir finished last season. I think 1-2 between Charvarius Ward and Lenoir, the 49ers are good at corner. But 2021 taught us that you need more than 2 corners, right? The injuries are going to hit, then your defense is only going to be as good as its worst corner. And Ambry Thomas was MIA last year. So is Ambry Thomas going to step up? Is somebody like Deshaun Jameson out of Texas, the undrafted free agent who looked good in OTAs, is he going to become a player in this mix? So there are options for the 49ers for sure. And Darrell Luter is another one of them, the 5th round pick, but the options are not yet proven. So those are my questions for their roster.
Yeah. The offensive line part's interesting because, Mike Clay from ESPN did the whole rankings and he hit the Niners offensive line as their primary weakness. But then you look at some of the numbers. The Niners O-line ranked 5th last year in Pro Football Focus pass blocking efficiency. They ranked 2nd in the NFL in pressure rate allowed. So, but I agree with you. The depth is unproven. They bring in John Feliciano. They've got Nick Zakelj, who John Lynch has talked up. Jalen Moore's been there for a couple years. They signed Joey Fisher gave him a lot of money as an undrafted player. Chris Forster told me that Fisher's a guard. He's not a tackle.
Yeah.
So they look fortified inside,
Yep.
but not necessarily a tackle. And that's the one spot. I read that Cincinnati may wind up cutting or trading Lael Collins because they moved Jonah Williams from left tackle to right tackle. Lael Collins, would the Niners have interest in a guy like that if he somehow was a trade candidate at the cut down? You know, it'll be interesting to see. I kind of think that McKivitz will be okay as a pass protector. My concern is what kind of a downgrade is he as a run blocker?
Yeah, which is an inverse, right, of what we've
Right.
grown accustomed to with the 49ers. They had prioritized run blocking over pass protection, and it really blew up in their faces in both 2019 and the Super Bowl, where they just weren't able to protect down the stretch at all. And then 2020, when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, that was just a mess of a season as far as pass protection went. So you've seen an investment in pass protection over the past 2 years that's actually paid off. You mentioned the stats in 2022. Those are all true. I think there's a lot of confusion amongst the fan base. People have a knee-jerk reaction just because all the quarterbacks got hurt. They say, "Oh, the pass protection must have been bad," and it wasn't in 2022. It was the best that they've had in the Shanahan and Lynch era, and that was after 2021, which was the best they had to date. So they actually tried to correct this issue by focusing more on the pass protection. And I think this latest move to let McGlinchey walk because he was a better run blocker than a pass protector in favor of Colton McKivitz, who's a better pass protector than a run blocker, I think that's all part of the same strategy. But you're right. You want both, and you need to balance that out. And I'll tell you what, though, they seem to have a lot of faith in Colton McKivitz, and they have to, because when you're the 49ers and every single season, it seems you're paying another star player, which is great. That means you're developing your guys into players who deserve money. But at a certain point, your draft picks and your developmental projects have to work out because you can't afford to pay the entire roster, right? You can pay a guy a year. The salary cap's going to grow. That's great. But those glue positions, somebody's got to, man up at those glue positions at a smaller cap hit. And the way you do that is through the draft. McKivitz was a 5th round pick in 2020, and then you develop him. So now by 2023, you hope he's ready to go to do a good job. And guess what? His cap hit's only $1.5 million. So if he does a good job, then the 49ers have found a way to cost efficiently take care of right tackle.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be the cheapest right tackle in the game, or at least among them. Okay, we're going to look ahead, but I want to take one look back at last year. What did you think of how the 49ers handled their quarterbacks at the end of last season and in the playoffs? And I bring this up because, I kind of thought Jimmy Garoppolo was going to come back and serve as the backup. And I don't know, but it sounded like the way that Shanahan sounded at the end of the year, like maybe Garoppolo kind of turned on them and refused to return. And maybe that caught the Niners off guard because the Niners were in the NFC Championship game with Josh Johnson as their number 2 quarterback, and they had Jacob Eason, but they cut him loose. I kind of wonder, looking at the way Johnson played, if Eason would have been better. But I kind of look at that whole situation and think maybe either the 49ers left themselves incredibly naked at the quarterback spot in the playoffs, or Garoppolo screwed them and basically said, no, I ain't coming back, and I'm not going to be a backup. And I don't care if it helps us, win the Super Bowl, because if Garoppolo had come off the bench against the Eagles, who knows? Who knows how that game would have gone? Instead, Josh Johnson showed that he was not prepared at all for that stage. Eason at that point had already been cut, and Lance was out for the year. What did you think? I mean, you've got some insight into this. I mean, what do you think, Dave? Did Jimmy? Do you think Kyle and John thought that Garoppolo was going to return, and then when he told them, "Hey, I'm not coming back," they just said, "Well, we'll wing it with Josh Johnson"? How do you think that whole thing came about?
Based on everything I know, it's the complete opposite. Based on everything I know, Kyle never expected Jimmy Garoppolo to return. I pressed him on it a lot because when I was talking to orthopedists and people around the situation, there definitely was a chance. I thought that Kyle Shanahan always downplayed the chance, but now we have the proof in the pudding. And the proof in the pudding is that Jimmy had to have a foot surgery this offseason. He's still on the shelf right now for the Raiders. I don't know if he's going to be ready for training camp or not, but that tells you that he wasn't going to be ready by the end of the season. Now, this is speculation on my part, but I do know here. This is first. I'll say what's not speculation. I do know that Jimmy Garoppolo really did want to make it back to play at the end of that season. And he was incentivized to as well. He was entering free agency. Imagine if Jimmy Garoppolo comes back, takes over for the 49ers, leads them to a Super Bowl. He had a great situation. They had Christian McCaffrey on that offense. You remember even before Garoppolo went down, the offense was performing really well because McCaffrey helped turbocharge that unit. So Garoppolo, had he been able to return to health, would have been able to return to an awesome situation, could have won himself a Super Bowl and tens of millions of dollars. I mean, he could have gotten a much bigger contract than the one that he got with the Raiders, which wasn't small, but still there was, I think, a lot of reasons from a pride perspective and from a financial perspective for Jimmy Garoppolo to play if he had been able to. But the surgery that he had to have in the offseason tells us that in all likelihood he wasn't able to play at that time. Now, this is speculation, so that was the non-speculatory part. This is speculation, but it's entirely possible that he pushed himself too hard. And that's why he had to have the surgery this offseason. And that might be why the 49ers were a little bit caught off guard, right? Maybe they thought, okay, hey, the return is progressing a little bit better. We're getting a little bit more hopeful. And then boom, if it hits a setback around the time of the playoffs, then all of a sudden the 49ers are kind of left out to dry. The problem at that point is, who do you bring in that would be significantly better than Josh Johnson, right? And there's a reason why every team in NFL history has been screwed once it's gotten to its fourth quarterback. It's not a thing to succeed with your fourth quarterback. It's over. Yeah. So, I've actually had this conversation with my dad a lot. He thinks they should have dressed 3 QBs for that game. The NFL teams didn't do that anymore. That just had been abandoned as practice. It was just thought that having a third quarterback would take away an important spot from the rest of the 53-man roster. But, in hindsight, it would have given the 49ers a little bit of a chance because Christian McCaffrey wouldn't have to be throwing passes in that second half. So, I mean, if there was an error in the 49ers' ways, I think you could point to that. But then again, I think every other team in the NFL would have made that error because everybody's just carrying 2 quarterbacks entering these games. Now this year it's going to be different because that third quarterback rule is going to be back. So there's going to be the ability for a little bit more flexibility. But as far as the Jimmy Garoppolo situation goes, the facts of the matter are that he had to have foot surgery this offseason on the foot that he damaged during the 49ers regular season against Miami. And I think if you follow those facts, they tell us that he wasn't ready at the NFC Championship game.
Very disappointing performance from Josh Johnson, though. He totally looked unready to play. They couldn't get plays called on time. He's fumbling snaps. He just looked like he took no reps and was not prepared for that situation. And I wondered about Jacob Eason, but I mean, Eason's never done anything in the NFL either. So it's not like, oh yeah, Jacob Eason, he'd be great. It's all Monday morning quarterbacking at this point, but what a frustrating way to end last year. All right, so that was last year. Let's go back to this year. And now there's this competition. And I do credit John Lynch for establishing one of the deeper rosters in football virtually every year he's been here. To the point now where I could see any number of about 6 or 7 players, not just cut, but maybe traded this summer. I have the list down as, Ambry Thomas, Zane Gonzalez, maybe a Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, maybe a Javon Kinlaw. If Ronnie Bell or Tay Martin come of age, maybe a Juwan Jennings. I just read a Bleacher Report article that listed the 3 49ers most likely to be traded, and they had Jordan Mason, which I don't think there's any chance of that. And then they also had Trey Lance and Sam Darnold and suggested that, Sam Darnold could be traded at the end of the preseason to the Green Bay Packers, who only have Sean Clifford behind Jordan Love there in Green Bay as number 2. What do you think? Will the 49ers trade any of their players before the cut down to the final 53, or do you not see it shaking down that way?
It all depends on how training camp plays out. Guys can get hurt, and that creates thinness at some positions, and that means that their hands will be tied. They can't trade anybody. But in the past, we have seen when there have been log jams, the 49ers have traded players away. They traded away Jonas Griffith, the linebacker, to Denver. I believe when they traded away Dakota Watson, that was also the Denver. So the 49ers seem to like trading with the Broncos toward the end of training camp. It's just a question that, those are all good names as far as potential candidates go right now on July 9th. But what's it going to be like at the end of August, right? That's when training camp ends. That's when they're going to have to crunch this roster down to 53 men. I will say that it's less likely than ever now because the practice squad is so expandable, right? The practice squad is like a taxi squad. It's 16 players, 17 if you count Alfredo Gutierrez, who's going to be the international exception again. And with the ability to call guys up, send them back down, for 2 games a season, it really does incentivize you to keep players in the building unless you are rewarded for them with handsome trade compensation. So it will depend on how training camp plays out. It's probably less likely than likely, but the 49ers have executed trades at the deadline before when there have been log jams.
Yeah, they seem to have a few players that might be too good to cut, but not necessarily good enough to make the roster. And maybe that could lead to, them, gathering more day 3 picks. All right, let's get to Brock Purdy. What do you think? Is he going to be ready to go week 1, September 10th at Heinz Field? And if not, who do you predict will start at quarterback that day at Heinz Field against the Steelers? Darnold, Allen, Lance? What do you think?
Allen. I think we have all the indicators are that Brock Purdy's on track. But again, it's July 6th. Is he still going to be on track on August 15th? Is he still going to be on track on September 10th, I believe, is the date of that game at Heinz Field. So there are still a lot of checkpoints for Brock Purdy to hit. I think that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have been very straightforward about this. They've said that Brock Purdy is the favorite, the leader in the clubhouse, for good reason. Football's a meritocracy. He's done a whole lot more than anyone else on this 49ers roster at the QB position in his career, even though it's not that big of a body of work, right? But it's still more than what Trey Lance has done. It's still more than what Sam Darnold has done over a larger sample, and it's more than Brandon Allen has done. So we saw some really impressive football from Brock Purdy last season. And he had weapons at his disposal, sure, but I mean, he said it himself. His job is to play point guard effectively with those 5 eligibles that the 49ers have at their disposal. And he played point guard very effectively. On top of that, there's a lot of, you've dealt with this a lot on social media. There's just a lot of misled narratives, or maybe I should say misleading narratives. 2 of them are Purdy doesn't have arm strength or requisite arm strength to play at the NFL, which is completely disproven by the tape. I mean, completely. I can't find a more categorically false statement if you actually look at the evidence of some of the throws that Brock Purdy made last year. And B, it's that Purdy somehow doesn't have upside. Purdy moves faster in a short area than Trey Lance does. Purdy's 10-yard burst is faster than Trey Lance's burst. And Trey's a good athlete. But Purdy, and I think this shocked the 49ers too. I think they said, oh, wow, he's running away from some defensive linemen in college. That's cute. Maybe it probably won't happen in the NFL. That's why they waited until number 262 to pick him. That's why the whole league skipped on him in the draft, except for the 49ers with that final pick. But when we saw Purdy actually play last year, his escapability was a plus asset. And it gave the 49ers a new look to their offense that he didn't have with Jimmy Garoppolo. He didn't have that escapability. So this whole narrative that Purdy somehow doesn't have upside, that he's just sitting in the pocket, checking down and is unable to step away from the rush, it couldn't be farther from the truth, right? He's got upside because of the escapability. And the arm strength, it has been able to deliver everything that Kyle Shanahan needs it to deliver throw-wise in this offense. So there's a reason why he's the favorite in the clubhouse. It's the resume and the upside. It's not just the resume. As far as the second part of your question goes, I have no clue. And I don't think the 49ers right now are in a position where they've decided either. Who do they favor more, Trey Lance or Sam Darnold? And Brandon Allen is also going to get some reps in there. I think they're really going to let this competition during training camp decide that.
One of the things that came out when you were, I think, on your honeymoon was Albert Breer asking that question and kind of reframing the quarterback thing, from, hey, who's got the highest upside, or that kind of that debate, to, hey, the Niners are all in on Brock. They want him to be their guy. If he's not ready to go week one, the question then becomes, who do they want to hold them over for 4 to 6 weeks? And then he asked that question, and as quickly as he asked it, he answered it and said, well, it's likely Sam Darnold, which I thought was it's a little presumptuous considering Darnold's never really accomplished much either at the NFL level. But it made me think once again that, he's getting his information from somebody on the inside, and maybe they've said, hey, if Brock is ready to roll week one, it's him. But if he ain't ready to roll, it's likely going to be Sam Darnold. We're going to find out this summer what these guys look like on the field side by side and in the preseason. And we'll have a lot more to go on at that point. Did you see the Breer report where he kind of reframed the argument of who's going to be number 2 and then suggested it was going to be Darnold over Lance? And I think there were an awful lot of people that really pushed back hard on that notion, if indeed that's a sourced report from Breer as opposed to his personal opinion.
Yeah, I saw all this stuff. I would check the internet once a day or so, and it would always pop up to the top of your feed on Twitter. I'm of the opinion that these are just opinions, that there's no way for anybody to really know. Of course, you can talk to some people in the building, but if the people in the building aren't even sure yet, and I don't think the 49ers would be running a competent organization right now if they had predetermined this, because you have invested so much in Trey Lance, and so much has been taken away by injuries over his first 2 seasons. I think it'd be malpractice to not run him out there in training camp and see if some of the mechanical improvements that he's been working on, see if that can hold up in training camp, see where he's at in a competition. This is football. Let competition decide the pecking order of your roster. So I don't believe for one second that the 49ers have determined something on July 6th. I keep on looking over because I'm checking the date to make sure I'm not saying the wrong date. But yeah, I really don't think, I think that the breeze might be blowing in a certain direction. There might be somebody in the building who Albert Breer knows who might like Sam Darnold, who might have, said something nice about Sam Darnold. And then Albert Breer goes and offers his opinion saying, I think it's going to be Sam Darnold. But whether it's Schefter, whether it's Breer, every single time these guys have spoken on this, they have made it fairly clear, I think, that it's their opinion. And, even leading up to the draft in 2021, I know Schefter was really sure in that one interview that it was going to be Mac Jones that the 49ers picked. But he never said what he was basing that on. And now we know, and I knew this before the draft, the 49ers didn't even let Mike McDaniel know who they were going to pick. The coaching staff was completely in the dark heading into the 2021 draft where they picked Trey Lance. So how was Adam Schefter supposed to know who they were going to pick? That's why I always kind of laugh at the notion that, it was supposed to be Mac Jones, but they reversed course. No, nobody knew. And that's what happens when nobody knows. People want to create a narrative because they don't like not knowing. And then if it's a false narrative, because they don't know, because there's no information coming out of the building, then that false narrative can grow into an echo chamber, right? And it starts bouncing around and getting louder. And that's how everybody was so sure, or not everybody, but almost everybody was so sure the 49ers were going to pick Mac Jones when they were actually going to pick Trey Lance. It's just that information was sealed behind closed doors. Not even Mike McDaniel knew who they were going to pick. This is a much smaller scale of that. But I think that right now the 49ers legitimately, again, are still doing their due diligence. They're still going to let training camp happen, and then they'll decide when the time is right who's going to start. And that's when you're actually going to have confirmed reports coming out instead of just opinions.
It is weird that guys, though, who we know have not been there for any of the OTAs would then voice their opinion on who's going to be the starter when they haven't seen Trey's development and they haven't seen the 2 quarterbacks side by side. I'll just say this. If I were them, I would not feel comfortable voicing my opinion on something that I hadn't put my own eyes on, unless I had some source saying, hey, trust me, it's going to be this guy over that guy. Otherwise, I would just be like, hey, it's going to be a competition. We'll find out this summer. But I think it is interesting to me that these guys were all willing to not just kind of discuss this openly, but also then include their opinion that Darnold, and I understand reading the free agent thing. Hey, they signed him on day one of free agency and blah, blah, blah. And he's the 12th highest cap figure on the entire team to be the third string quarterback. I understand several of the things they're looking at, but still, I think I would have left my opinion, if it simply was my opinion, out of that, just for fear of being wrong.
Yeah. Well, knowing 49ers social media, I would have done that. Here's the thing. I always listen to these things in context when they're speaking. And to me, they're almost speaking flippantly when they're giving their opinion. It was almost like a side thought. Oh, yeah, Sam Darnold. Yeah, I think he's going to start. I don't think that these guys realize how personally 49ers Twitter takes those lines, right? If they give an opinion about Sam Darnold or Trey Lance, it's going to get aggregated by 50 different sites. Everybody's going to go on to their channel and talk about it. Comment sections are going to blow up, and it's going to take this one line. Remember that Adam Schefter and Albert Breer are reporting on all 32 teams. So
right.
He might not even thought twice about that one line. He might have heard from somebody in the 49ers that Sam Darnold has looked good, and that's why he said, oh, yeah, and I think that Sam Darnold might be in that position because the 49ers like him. And then he went on to his next line, and then he went on to reporting on one of the other 32 teams. He might not have even thought twice about that line at the time, yet 49ers fans on the internet are going to dissect it for the next 3 months. Right. So I think that there might be a little bit of a disconnect between those two. And that's why in the off season, I just always urge people to sit back and just let it play out, because we can go crazy if we take the magnifying glass to every little sentence that's said. At best, this is going to be secondhand information, right? At best, it's not coming directly from the building.
What is your best guess, if you had to establish an over-under, on the number of Brock Purdy snaps that he'll take in the preseason in games?
That's tough. It's going to depend on where he is health-wise. I remember when Jimmy Garoppolo was coming off of his ACL tear in 2019, they wanted to get him in there for 2 games. And they got him in there in week 2, and he looked terrible against Denver for a drive, maybe 2 drives, was just atrocious. I mean, that's when all of the injury rust was still there. And then he looked really sharp in week 3 of the preseason against Kansas City for a half. And Kyle Shanahan said, okay, he's knocked off the rust. He actually played on the same field where he tore the ACL in Kansas City. So it's kind of a big full circle thing. 49ers said he's ready to go. We didn't see him again until week 1. I wonder if, health permitting, the 49ers are going to try to do something similar with Brock Purdy. Maybe give him a series or 2 in week 2, and then give him a half in week 3. Because at some point you feel that, because of how the NFL works, game speed and all that, also just the psychological component of coming back from an injury, you do feel like maybe he has to get out there in live action to be able to reacclimate. You don't want that live action to come for the first time in week 1. So if they follow the model that they followed with Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019, it'll be a series or 2 in week 2 and a half in week 3. But again, I don't know where Purdy's elbow is going to be at that point. So it's all going to be health dependent.
Yeah. If you had me guess, I would probably say, 25 snaps. That would be my guess over the course of the 3 games. I'm not sure exactly how it will pan out as far as which game and where in the game and so on and so forth. But I'd say 20 to 25 snaps in the preseason would be my guess. Here we are in early July. We'll hit one more quarterback thing at the end, but let me ask you this. We're there and seeing this. And you've been there every step of the way for, every OTA, minicamp, so on and so forth. Is there a young player that you think has bust out potential this summer who, because of their ability, could kind of change the outlook of this season? I've got, 8 or 9 names here of guys that I think could be candidates. Jordan Mason, Trey Lance, Danny Gray, Kalia Davis, Drake Jackson, Samuel Womack, Marcelino McCrary Ball, and I even kind of like Spencer Wagee from North Dakota State as a player that I think he could maybe make an impact this year. Did you see any young player that you felt, watch this guy, he may bust out, and if he does, he could kind of change the way this team looks a little bit this year.
Well, the guy out of the guys that you listed, the guy that's at the most potentially impactful hinge point is Drake Jackson. Because you look at the way this defense is constructed, they were the number one defense in football last year. And I think on paper, along the front line, they've only gotten stronger because they added Javon Hargrave, who was one of the most impactful defenders in the entire NFL. Took him away from Philadelphia as an added bonus. So this 49ers defense is locked, loaded, and ready to go at every single position except for the edge rusher spot opposite Nick Bosa, where coincidentally they lost Charles Omenihu, they lost Sansom Ebukam, and they lost Jordan Willis to free agency. So this goes back to one of my first points. At some point, while you're paying a bunch of guys, and this offseason they paid Javon Hargrave so that the really rich collection of stars got even bigger. At some point when you're doing that, your draftees and your developmental guys have to fill in the rest of the gaps. And the one gap that I'm seeing that needs to be filled in by a draftee / developmental guy is edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa. And that's Drake Jackson. So out of all those players, he's the guy in a position of leverage right here. He's in a position where he can make a big difference for the 49ers. We're talking really good defense versus potentially historical defense. If Drake Jackson shows up and can become an 8-sack guy for the 49ers, assuming that Bosa stays healthy, assuming that Hargrave stays healthy, you look at the linebacker core, that's the best in football. The secondary should be fine playing behind that kind of front seven. All of a sudden, you'll be talking, I think we'll be looking at some historical trends for this 49ers defense, just like we were in 2019 when that unit was firing at full cylinders and Dee Ford was still healthy. So that's a lot of pressure on Drake Jackson's shoulders. But to answer your question, I mean, I think that's the most accurate way I can do it because he is in that spot where he might be that determining figure. Have we seen potential? I think so. I mean, he's got tremendous bend. We already saw that last year, but he straight ran out of gas toward the end of the year. I mean, he had played 11 games in a season at most entering last year at USC. 49ers played 20. So you can see how he did run out of gas, how he did hit that rookie wall. He's about 12 to 15 pounds stronger now. I know you saw him out at OTAs. Physically looks different. But, yeah, I mean, you could do all the right stuff in the weight room. It is still a battle when you get out there on an NFL field week in, week out to be able to stand up against the run, not just in September, but also in December when it's cold out, when it hurts a little bit more to get physical. So, I mean, the test in front of Drake Jackson is a big one that's not going to be won or passed just by picking up 12 pounds of muscle in the offseason. He's going to go out there and prove it. But if he does, I think the ceiling for this 49ers defense can be somewhere really special.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy because he played really well. I thought he played really smart last year. I mean, he batted down a number of passes. If he couldn't get there, he would cross the quarterback's face and impact the play. Usually that's a veteran type move. So I thought he showed some advanced technique. But his body the difference in the upper body between, like, let's say Samson Ebukam and Drake Jackson last year was night and day. And now Drake looks bulkier, but he's not necessarily cut. He just looks bigger. And then the question is, can he retain that weight in season over the course of many, many weeks? And then I assume Bosa is going to get an extension. But let's just say Bosa had any kind of an injury and had to be, out for 3-4 weeks. Could Drake handle constant double teams if Kerry Hyder or, Austin Bryant were opposite him, or, Cleveland Farrell? I don't know. And that kind of dovetail. By the way, on this question, I kind of think Jordan Mason might really establish himself this summer as a really strong player who can really impact things and could push ahead of Elijah Mitchell and maybe Ty Davis Price and be a primary runner for the 49ers. He'd be the guy that I would probably say would be the young player that I think could bust out. But as far as the next question, do the Niners, in your mind, Dave, need to add a veteran free agent edge rusher? I mean, they brought in Hargrave, but they'd said goodbye to Willis and Ebukam and Omenihu, and they play their D-line effectively in a rotation. Like, the backup D linemen on this team play. The backup O linemen only play if there's an injury for the most part. But on the D line, everybody who's up plays in a rotation. How much are they going to miss those three guys? It's about 700 snaps. And do you look at their roster and say, you know what? After Drake and Bosa, there's a dramatic drop off to Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant, and the Niners absolutely need to add a free agent edge rusher? Or do you think they're a little bit more solid there than I'm giving them credit for?
Well, again, the answer is somewhere in the middle, and where the answer actually ends up landing is so dependent on Drake Jackson. That's why I mention him as this hinge point. If Drake Jackson takes the leap that the 49ers want him to take in year two, he solves a whole lot of problems. If he doesn't, yeah, you probably should be looking for somebody else. Now, the problem for the 49ers is they're trying to build as sustainable of a roster as possible. And they already have $271 million in liabilities on the 2024 books. That means they're going to have to slash millions upon millions. We don't even know what the cap is going to be yet, but it's not going to be 270 million in 2024. Cap space that you don't use this year carries over to next year. So they have 10.4 million right now. They can either decide to go for an edge rusher to, fortify the roster at the last minute during training camp, or they can keep that open either for in-season maneuverability, like last season's trade for Christian McCaffrey, or potentially even a carryover into 2024 so they can keep this roster as sustainable as possible. So nothing that the 49ers do from a signing perspective should be taken lightly, because there are potential ramifications to anything that they do downstream financially. And that's why I think they're going to sit back and they're going to collect as much information as they possibly can during training camp about Drake Jackson. They're going to look to see what Cleveland Farrell looks like in their system. Remember, it's totally possible that Farrell looks a whole lot better with Chris Kasarik and the 49ers than he did with the Raiders, because that's just the thing that happens when players play under Chris Kasarik. And the same thing with Austin Bryant. Don't forget about Robert Beal Jr. too. The rookie out of Georgia. He has all of the measurables that Chris Kasarik wants in his system. So I think, the luxury of having a great position coach like Kasarik and a good scouting department that has gone out and grabbed players that seem to fit what Kasarik wants to work with. He wants a certain type of clay to mold. Well, they've got 4 shots at this, right? Between Drake Jackson, Bryant, Cleveland Farrell, and Robert Beal Jr. You would think if you're the 49ers, you're going to believe that Kasarik can, develop at least 2 really competent edge rushers out of those 4 players. And that's the bet they're going to take. If during training camp, it seems it's not trending in that direction, I think that's when you make that signing. But I think that's more of a last resort thing, just because of the bigger financial picture that the 49ers are facing right now. They are not in a position where they could just be whimsically spending $5 million here, $6 million there, $7 million there. They have to really protect the money that they have, because they've been spending so much over the recent years.
Did you notice Beal at all in any of the offseason stuff? Because I don't know if it's just the number that he got. I think they gave him 33. But I just never really noticed him. Now, I try to make sure I don't go out of my way to look for guys. I try to make, them kind of show themselves, naturally and organically. I try not to be like, okay, where's this guy? Where's that guy? He never stood out to me at any point. But what you referenced there, he's got sub 4.5 speed. He's got an incredible wingspan. He had a really nice sack against TCU in the national semi. Or was it the national championship?
Yeah.
He looked really, really explosive at Georgia in a small sample size. Did you ever catch him this summer and feel like you saw something that you liked?
No, and I'm going to be consistent with this. People always ask me about O&D linemen and OTAs, and I say I'm not trying to evaluate these guys during OTAs. I'm not a line expert. I'm sure Chris Kasarik has ways to see certain stuff. I'm sure Chris Furster has ways to see certain stuff of an OTAs. But for me, my eyes really move more toward the trenches once the pads come on at training camp. So, OTAs, I like the receiver presence from somebody like Ronnie Bell. I thought Danny Gray made some strides, even though he dropped too many passes. That's what I kept my eye on, right? I wanted to see Trey Lance's mechanics. I wanted to see Jake Moody kick, and I got to see all those things. But until the pads come on, once they're out of the shorts, it's really tough to really evaluate the truly physical positions, right? And that's why running back evaluation is extra tricky, because even when pads come on, you're not tackling to the ground. So it's really hard to gauge, okay, who really has that dog in him at running back, especially in the way that the 49ers want it, because they love all this stuff after contact. That's where preseason is important. So anyway, as far as Robert Beal goes, I didn't notice him, but I wasn't expecting to notice him. And we'll see what happens in training camp.
Okay, now let's talk about guys in the bubble real quick. I'll give you 10 or so guys that I think are on the bubble. You tell me if you think they're at the end of this camp cut, trade candidate, or they make the roster. All right, here we go. Brandon Allen.
He could be on the practice squad. He's not going to make the 53-man roster. So cut.
Okay, so that one's interesting. Before we move off of this, Brandon Allen is going to make $1 million, Dave, if he makes the roster. The NFL minimum's like $750. Why did he come here if he was Joe Burrow's number 2? Did Cincinnati not want him? If you play on the practice squad, you're going to make $207,000 if you stayed there all year. Why would he come here for $207,000 and an $800,000 pay cut? That one is very bizarre to me. Unless he's a lot worse than I thought, and maybe Cincinnati didn't want him back. I don't know.
And again, injuries happen. We saw the 49ers have 4 of them at the quarterback position or more. I lost count last year. You're a call away from being on the 53. Also, if some funny business does happen amongst the top 3 quarterbacks, hey, if Brock Purdy is not ready to go and the 49ers want to carry 3 quarterbacks and they have the 3 quarterback rule this year to be able to flex a QB up, all of a sudden Brandon Allen is a much more prominent part of that mix. It's just really hard to tell because the situation is going to be different on August 31st, which I believe is cut down day, than it is right now in early July. So, I just think that there is uncertainty shrouds the 49ers quarterback room until we know exactly when Brock Purdy is going to return and until we know how camp starts progressing with Trey Lance, with Sam Darnold, and with Brandon Allen. So I think he's happy to compete amidst that uncertainty because that means a potential opportunity in a Kyle Shanahan system. Because if you do get a shot to play in this system, and every quarterback got a shot to play last year, you're going to have a shot to put up big numbers because you have Shanahan calling the plays and you have a lot of star skill position players to throw to.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Ty Davis Price, cut, trade candidate, or he makes the roster?
So I'm opening up my 90-man depth chart right now where I have all my projections. I just want to be consistent with what I have on here. I have Davis Price making the roster. I have the 49ers carrying 5 backs, and that includes Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, and Ty Davis Price. I don't think maybe early in Shanahan's tenure, they carried only 4 at the start of the season, but in recent years, they've always carried at least 5. Last year, they even carried 6. Remember, they carried Trey Sermon, and then they cut him like 2 days later.
This one, you got to really think about this one because I know the first one is he's on the roster, but Ronnie Bell did look good in the minicamp. I agree with you on that. And I'm a Tay Martin fan from Oklahoma State. And Tay's stronger than he was a year ago. And he's got very good hands, could really fire in the preseason. Juwan Jennings, is he cut? Is he a trade candidate? Does he make the 53? I can't see them signing him beyond this year.
My 6 receivers, and I think they're going to take 6 on the inside looking in right now, are Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings as your number 3, your slot guy, Danny Gray, Ray McLeod, and Ronnie Bell. So I have Tay Martin on the outside looking in. I have Chris Conley on the outside looking in. Willie Snead, I think, is going to be one of those practice squad yo-yo guys for special teams, just like he was last year. So I do think that Jennings makes the team. I think he just really embodies so much of what the 49ers want offensively. He gets under defenders' skin. He's a great blocker. And Kyle Shanahan has actually gone out and said that Jennings is their best route runner. And we're like, our best separator, he says, which is obviously very related to route running. A couple times Shanahan has said that. And one time I'm like, wait, even better than Brandon Ayuk? And he's like, yeah, I'll put Jennings right up there. This guy separates. He's obviously not a fast 40 guy. That's why he lasted until the 7th round in 2021. But he sure does separate. And just go back and watch the tape of that game against the Rams in week 18 when they went down to SoFi and won at the end of the 2021 regular season. Obviously, Jennings had the big catch to tie the game, the touchdown catch, but he also made 2 plays in overtime on third down, out patterns in overtime that were really impressive routes, that were money catches. And, players who can do that for you. And I think Jauan Jennings in a contract year this year is going to be even more motivated to make plays like that, and who can block. Those aren't guys that you just jettison in a year where you're trying to win it all. So
I hear you.
I think Jauan Jennings is going to be on this football team.
Did you say Gray is on too? He was one of your 6?
Yeah, so I think it's probably between Gray and Chris Conley, because Gray's a burner. Chris Conley's a burner. I think Chris Conley's there to push Danny Gray a little bit, but Conley's a 30-year-old vet on a 1-year deal. 49ers benefit a lot more from having Danny Gray in year 2 emerge. And, last year, Danny Gray just never developed a presence. And a lot of Shanahan receivers don't develop a presence early on because Shanahan coaches them so hard. There's a lot swimming in their heads, but it pays off, right? It paid off for Brandon Ayuk. Deebo Samuel emerged quickly, but Deebo Samuel was a special case. Took Jauan Jennings some time. I think that I started to see a little bit of a presence from Danny Gray during OTAs. So I would put him on the inside track against somebody like Chris Conley for right now.
Oh, and Shanahan has said to me how important a guy like Gray is for play calling. He creates space because he'll run off the coverage. All right, how about tight end, Ross Dwelly?
I have him on the outside looking in right now but it just depends on if one or both of these rookies make the team. I have Kittle and I have Werner making the team. Latu is a 3rd-round pick, so you'd think he'd make it, but the 49ers, they don't care about draft position anymore. And if you talk to Brian Fleury, their tight ends coach, he said they were shocked that Braden Willis lasted until the 7th round. They obviously view him as somebody that's higher than a 7th-round pick as far as his value goes. And a lot of the league looks at Cameron Latu as somebody lower than the 3rd-round pick. They thought that he might go in the 5th. I mocked Cameron Latu to the 49ers in the 5th. Anyway, throw the draft status out the window. The best players are going to make the team here. Neither was a particularly valuable pick to where, oh my gosh, we have to carry him just because of where we drafted him. And, if all goes well for both of these rookies, I would say that Kittle, Werner, Willis, and Latu make the team. Now, if one of Willis or Latu isn't quite ready and is more of a practice squad type of guy, that's when Dwelly keeps his job. And Dwelly, I believe, has now signed 6 separate 1-year contracts with the 49ers. So he knows how to stick around. You got to give him credit, but you could just feel Kyle Shanahan just itching to raise the ceiling of tight end 2 on this team.
Yeah, no question.
He tried to do it in 2020 with Jordan Reed. We never got to see Reed and Kittle on the field together for an extended period because of injuries. It's just tough to spend draft capital at tight end when you're already paying George Kittle so much money. So this year they did spend lower draft capital, maybe a little bit higher with Cameron Latu, and we'll see if these guys pan out. And if they do, that could squeeze guys like Dwelly out of the picture.
Matt Pryor, 60 games in the NFL, 24 career starts. To me, he looked a little out of shape at the mini camp, and you got Jalen Moore and you got other guys. This 3rd tackle, I think Leroy Watson, to me, looked much improved from last year. They're all cheaper, I'm sure, than Pryor. What's your guess? Is Pryor going to make it?
I think it's really dependent on Jalen Moore. I mean, it's put up or shut up time for Jalen Moore this training camp, and he can go out there and he could seize the swing tackle job. He has that opportunity. He got some reps with the ones with Trent Williams not doing team drills during the offseason program. So again, I don't know if they were good reps, bad reps. You'd have to ask an expert to tell you that, because if pads aren't on, let's not pretend like we know all too much about what's going on along those trenches. So training camp is where we're going to have a better idea of how somebody like Jalen Moore is responding to this challenge. And if he outplays Matt Pryor, he'll make the team. If the 49ers aren't comfortable with Jalen Moore's pass protection, his run blocking, I think Matt Pryor is probably a higher floor kind of player since he already has started at the NFL level. Leroy Watson, that's more of a wild card. We talked about him. I mean, he was literally a tight end just a couple years ago in college. Last season, he was bulking up on the practice squad. He's bulked up now. Is he ready to be somebody that an NFL team entrusts to a swing tackle position? Well, maybe he can earn a little bit of that cred during training camp, but I would still say that he's a longer shot for the 49ers at this point.
Javon Kinlaw, trade candidate or makes the roster?
I don't know why anybody would trade for him. I mean, his value is really low right now because he hasn't been able to stay on the field healthy, and he still has one relatively expensive year left on his contract because he was a first round pick. But for the 49ers, that's a sunk cost. You can't worry about it. He's already on your team, so it's not gonna, it's not gonna hurt you to let him play this out. And I think they're really excited to put Javon Kinlaw in a situation where there's not nearly as much pressure on him as there was in the past because they got Javon Hargrave. So Kinlaw goes from be our starting 3 technique to be a rotational defensive lineman. And that's good for his knee and probably good for his mindset. Contract year, rotational defensive lineman. He could kind of, rotate in against some more unsuspecting O-linemen. Javon Hargrave is going to get the best reps from the opposition. Javon Kinlaw might be on a good platform this year to produce a little bit more than the past. And if he doesn't, it's not the end of the world because he's only a rotational guy. He's not somebody that the 49ers are relying on the inside.
Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles.
So a similar situation as the tight end room. They have these young linebackers. They drafted 2 of them. They have D. Winters and they have Jalen Graham. And then they also have Marcelino McCrary-Ball, who is a second-year guy who really impressed them on the practice squad, and they brought him back this year. So you obviously have Warner and you have Greenlaw. They're going to make the team as your 1 and 2. Then you have Warren Burks. He's going to make the team as your specialist, and he could be the number 3 linebacker until one of the young guys that I just listed is fully ready. But Flannigan-Fowles, he's a lot like a lower tier version of Warren Burks. He's a big time special teams contributor. He's linebacker depth, but he's obviously behind Warren Burks on both of those pecking orders. So if D. Winters and Jalen Graham and Marcelino McCrary-Ball blow you away during training camp, or if only 2 of those guys blow you away, that might push Flannigan-Fowles out of the mix. If only one of those guys blows you away, then they make the roster, say it's Jalen Graham. Then maybe D. Winters goes to the practice squad. And in that case, Flannigan-Fowles keeps his 53-man spot for now. It just depends on the degree of impressiveness that we see from these rookies. As of right now, I have Winters making the team, and that could maybe be interchangeable to Graham. I really don't know. I just have one of those rookies making the team, and I have Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles also making the team. But that might be something that shifts as I watch camp.
Does that mean Marcelino? You have Marcelino out?
I have Marcelino out, but again, that's something that can shift with camp. Yeah. I have D. Winters almost listed as a placeholder at this point. I think that the chances of Winters, Graham, and McCrary-Ball are on even footing right now, and we'll see what happens.
Ambry Thomas?
I have him on the inside right now, but Deshaun Jameson's going to come knocking on that door if Ambry Thomas.
He was impressive.
Yeah. I mean, he was against the 3rd team, right, in OTAs, but he still made plays, and I'm looking at skill position guys in OTAs. It's more of a passing league. I look at guys that are pouncing on the football, and Deshaun Jameson had practices with multiple pass breakups. And then you look at what he did at Texas as a returner, and he's electric. Yes. Is he a little bit short? Yes, but that could be a good thing. That could mean the 49ers this year have a big starting slot cornerback. They have Isaiah Oliver. He's 6'1", 210. That's a complete pivot from the past when K'Wan Williams with 5'9", 185 was running the position. It's going to give the 49ers some big-time flexibility against the run, but maybe they're also going to want to carry a more shutterbug-like little smaller nickel cornerback, and maybe Deshaun Jameson can fit that role. So special teams adaptability and maybe that's size or lack thereof, maybe that comes to play in his favor because he's going to have really good short area quickness that the 49ers can use to really expand the diversity of their defense.
2 last ones. Miles Hartsfield, who comes with Wilks from Carolina, and Zane Gonzalez. I kind of see Zane Gonzalez, believe it or not, and maybe a trade candidate.
Yeah.
And Miles Hartsfield did not impress me at all. To me, he looks kind of out of shape, and I know Wilks likes him and he brought him from Carolina, but I think there's a very good chance Hartsfield doesn't make the team.
I have Hartsfield getting cut, and I think that Hartsfield's value is right now in the offseason program and in training camp. He's helping Wilks install the playbook, right? Wilks brings a guy that can be, bring some coach on the field like qualities. As far as making the team, though, it's a crowded safety room. It's a crowded DB room. Somebody's going to have to get hurt, I think, to justify carrying him on the team beyond the cut down. So that's where I have Miles Hartsfield. Who was the second player that you asked me about?
The kicker, the Zane Gonzalez.
Yeah. Oh, and can't believe more teams didn't try to do this. I think it's a genius business move from the 49ers. Zane Gonzalez has another season under contract, obviously. It's a good contract. He's not overly expensive. None of it's guaranteed. The 49ers picked him up at essentially zero cost, a conditional 7th-round pick swap. But now you control this guy's rights. And if a team gets desperate for a kicker close to the 53-man cutdown, it's a free potential 5th, 6th-round pick. I don't know how desperate somebody will be, but it's still a draft pick that you otherwise wouldn't have had. I mean, the teams that didn't try to do this, it was like they had a $20 bill sitting on the ground and they didn't pick it up. So the 49ers essentially picking up potential free money. I'm not sure if it's going to work out that way, but there's no downside to it, right? Because if nobody wants to trade for Zane, they can cut him, and that pick swap never happened. It's a conditional thing. So to me, the 49ers are just put themselves in a really good position to potentially flip Zane Gonzalez. It's like, buying a house that hasn't been repaired. You fix the house and then you sell it for a profit.
They actually did it twice, Dave, because there's a report that was out when you were gone or maybe it was right before you left, about Coletto, the fullback, that the Niners maybe, they signed him. They outbid some teams to sign him as an undrafted free agent, college rookie. And now there's talk that, teams like Dallas or the Jets or some of these teams that need a fullback, if he has a decent, camp and the Niners go lean and with 5 backs, let's say, at the cut down and they cut Coletto, maybe before they cut him, they might be able to pawn him for a 7th-round pick to one of these teams that needs a fullback. So I think, they may wind up getting 2 draft picks out of Zane Gonzalez and Jack Coletto and have neither of them ever suit up a snap for them in the regular season. If they were able to do it, it's borderline genius. 2 last questions before we let you go. Steve Wilks' defense will look different from DeMeco Ryans' defense or not. And if it does look different, how will the average layman, the average casual fan notice the difference between Wilks' D and Ryan's D?
Well, it's going to look different. I think the coverages in the back end are going to increase in complexity because that's where Wilks specializes. It's in the secondary. I don't think that the layman is going to be able to notice that, but the 49ers can hope that the results speak for themselves. What the layman will notice is the 49ers are going to blitz more. Last time Steve Wilks was a defensive coordinator in Cleveland a few years ago, NFL defensive coordinator, he blitzed 38% of the time. DeMeco only blitzed 21% of the time last year. And Steve has already talked about blitzing more. He's already strongly hinted that's going to happen. So, and you look at the personnel too. They brought in Isaiah Oliver, bigger nickel, somebody who could fight through some blocks and, also just spring off the line of scrimmage on a sneak attack. He's going to be able to blitz. I think Jair Brown as a third safety is going to be able to blitz. I mean, the 49ers are armed with a versatile personnel in the back 7. I'm counting linebackers in the secondary to be able to execute what Steve Wilks wants to do. I mean, his fingerprints were all over the Jair Brown drafting. He really liked Jair Brown. Just look at the tendencies of Wilks in the past. He blitzes a lot. And then look at what the 49ers have personnel-wise. You should see an increase in that regard.
The only thing I'll say is that, if he does hear what he's done in other spots, when the Niners do go zone, it's going to be a lot of cover 3. And I think cover 3 fits the Niners. Why? Because you've got Talanoa Hufanga, who's so great at lurking up on the line of scrimmage and identifying that mesh point, and there's no hesitation in his game. When he sees it, he goes. He attacks that mesh point. In a lot of ways, he's the perfect box safety for the cover 3 and let the other safety, man the deep middle. 2 last ones. Michael Alanis throws in a super chat. He says, I really wish the 49ers content creators would stop beating around the bush and flat out just tell the truth. There's really no competition at quarterback. The pecking order is Purdy 1, Darnold 2, Lance 3. I don't know that. I'll say this. If I'm just going on my eyes, we only saw 20% of OTAs. Every time they had a week of practice, we got 1 day. But my eyes told me that Darnold and Lance were basically neck and neck. I did not see a dramatic. I couldn't sit there and say Lance was way better than Darnold, but I couldn't sit there and say the opposite either. To me, they're really, really close. Purdy had an incredible rookie year. He's the clear one. But I don't think it's about, us being evasive or not willing to say or take a stand on this. It just, to me, it has not shown itself on the field. And I'm waiting. If Lance had outperformed Darnold or the other way around, I'd say it. I just haven't seen that yet. I don't know what you've seen, Dave.
No, it's even if we did see somebody impress a little bit more during OTAs, we'd have to say it's just OTAs. I mean, Sam Darnold is still new to the playbook. Trey Lance is rusty off of 2 years of injuries. Training camp is going to give us these answers. And I think there's two debates within what Michael is saying here. One is there are people that are insisting that somehow Brock Purdy is not actually the leader in the clubhouse. They're saying that Kyle and John are lying about that, and that's preposterous. Brock Purdy should be and is the firm leader in the clubhouse for number one. And I think that's part of what Michael is saying. Yeah, yes, there is no real competition for number one because Brock Purdy has earned that job, and now he just has to get healthy, and he'll have that job. But where there is uncertainty is between Lance and Darnold, and also there can be more uncertainty opened if Brock Purdy's recovery hits a setback. So there's so many possibilities and permutations of how this can go. It's why I just look at it as, I have two sayings I like. One is option power. 49ers giving themselves as much as possible. And the other is they're going to let this play out organically. And everybody can calm down. It will play out organically. The first organic piece of the puzzle is pending Brock Purdy's health, but I think very organically he's earned QB1 through what he did last year.
Last question, Dave, and we really appreciate your time. Welcome back from the honeymoon. We're really happy to see you. We'll see you at camp in 2-3 weeks or so, and get a chance to wrap more on a regular basis. But let's finish on one on Trey Lance. What do you see as the Trey Lance endgame options for the 49ers? And I bring this up, Dave, because my sense of it, first of all, I'm in the camp that believes that both Purdy and Lance are going to be franchise quarterbacks, that Purdy's ready to be that player right now, and that Trey, because of the traits that he has at the Niners that made the Niners draft him and be interested, he still has. And I just think that they've just realized that he's a little bit more raw than maybe they anticipated. But I really think that he's a future franchise quarterback. That all being said, what are the end game options? I had Al Sacco the other day on. He does a Niner blog and YouTube channel, and he's like, he thinks it's going to come to a head at the cut down. To me, that's bad news for Trey Lance, because I think Trey Lance needs more time to kind of ascend. What are the options? I suggested that if the 49ers really do love Trey Lance long term, that maybe they redo his deal, make it more palatable on the cap going forward, and just keep him as a backup quarterback, either number 2 or number 3, and whatever they want, and just keep developing him over time instead of forcing this time frame where if he's not ready by week 1, then we can't keep him because he's got the 5th highest cap figure and so on and so forth, and he has to be cut or traded or moved off the roster. I like the idea of Purdy's your 1, Trey's your long-term play, and maybe they redo his contract to reflect that. Is that even a possibility? No. You're way more dialed in on the cap than I am on this.
No.
What
Trey
are the
Lance
options?
has a fully guaranteed rookie contract, so the 49ers are stuck with it.
Unless they trade him, right?
Yeah, unless they trade him. But who's going to pay anything for Trey Lance right now? His value is as low as it's ever been, right? He hasn't played essentially in 2 years. It's been really sporadic. You talk about injury questions with Jimmy Garoppolo. Trey Lance has gotten hurt at a much higher rate than Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. Maybe it's not his fault, but he still has to show something for the league to value him in such a way. But Trey Lance here, this is why this is a financially tough situation for the 49ers. As the number 3 overall pick in 2021, he received a signing bonus of $34.1 million. That's money that hit his bank account. That has to hit the cap at some point. It is divided by year. Over the 4 years, it hits the cap. It's prorated. And that means that the 49ers still owe half of that $34 million signing bonus against the cap, plus a base salary this year. It's not that high, of $940,000. But anyway, if they do cut Trey Lance, it's more expensive by $5.3 million than to keep him. So you have to find a trade partner. And what's the trade partner going to pay at this point? Will it be worth your time? I'm of the school of thought that no, it wouldn't be worth your time because you just ran out of quarterbacks last year.
Right.
I mean, your season went down the drain because you didn't have enough QBs. So why would you be willing, just less than a calendar year later, why would you be willing to trade talent away for peanuts at that position, even if it is raw, right? So I'm with you. I think that they're going to sit here and they're going to develop Trey Lance. And more importantly, in the short term, they're going to say, we need numbers in the quarterback room. That's their strategy has screamed that all off season. They say, we want numbers. They banged the table for the third quarterback rule to come into effect. They got their way. And now they have the QBs. Why not keep them to avoid catastrophe that you faced last season?
Okay, let's kick it one more step down the road before we let you go. Let's just say Brock's the one, plays well. Trey keeps developing, but him and let's say Darnold are on the team, and they don't play. They go with Brock all year. He's healthy all year. It's a miracle. Then what? Can they tear up his contract for next year and give him a more palatable, cheaper contract? Because Trey has maintained before he's been asked this question, Dave, in front of our faces at least 3 times that I can remember. Trey, do you want to be here long? Before the question can even get out, he's like, oh, yep, I want to be here. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to be here. So he's maintained that. And if the Niners have maintained what they've maintained, if we should take them at face value, they've maintained all the way through. We've never changed our view of Trey Lance. So obviously they still like him. They drafted him and invested a lot to draft him. That sounds like two sides that want to stay together, but other people see them parting ways. If they bite the bullet, pay the freight, he's on the roster all year, but Brock's the number one. What are their options then?
Well, he's a year closer to finishing out his rookie deal. They're going to have to decide on his 5th-year option,
which is
offseason.
$17 million or something like that.
For QB, it'd be really high. At this rate, Trey Lance would have to start this year and have to have a good year for the 49ers or a year of progress for them to consider that. But again, it's too early for that decision because we don't know what the hell is going to happen this year.
Sure.
So as of right now, he's got 1 year left under contract after this one, 2024. That season, you would face about $10 million in dead money. It wouldn't be more expensive. You wouldn't save anything, but it wouldn't be more expensive to cut him or whatever at that point. Maybe he would be more tradable if there was only 1 year left, and you would also be willing to take a lower return at that point. I just think it's neither here nor there. I don't think the 49ers are thinking of it in those terms because when, just in any economic situation, you have to make the decision when the decision actually presents itself. The decision isn't presenting itself right now, I think, for the 49ers. I think that's in 2024 when so many other variables have to happen before then that are going to affect what that decision is going to look like. So with quarterbacks, we always have this obsession with what's going to happen in a year, what's going to happen in 2, but we need to be focused on what's going to happen now. And I think the priority right now is to bolster numbers in the quarterback room. The 49ers are going for numbers there, and that's what's going to naturally allow them to give Trey Lance a little bit more runway to develop.
Awesome stuff, man. We love rapping with you. We'll see you in camp. Anytime you want me to come on the channel, I'd love to come on. You got a final thought on your way out the door? I mean, we're getting ready to be like, all double days, all day camp, the sun hat, sunburn, more peeling.
I've been in the desert in Dubai and it was 108 degrees with humidity. So camp is going to feel like there's an air conditioner on for me. I prepared for this. I'm ready for it.
Seriously, it's camp and more camp this summer. Dave, good to see you. Thanks for your time. We'll let you go. Have a great rest of your day. And congratulations, by the way, on the marriage, man. It seems like I've known you for years. You were a young college student. Now you're an old married guy.
Yeah, that was a couple girlfriends ago. That was back in 2013. That was 10 years ago, 2013.
Seriously.
Yeah, so the height of our Stanford pregame show on KMBR was 10 years ago. Look
wild. What's happened to Stanford since.
Yeah. Maybe we should have kept on doing the show.
Yeah. And I went to Sac State. You went to Stanford, and now Stanford is being coached by Sac State's coach.
Yeah, it all came full circle.
There you go. Dave, good to see you, man. Thanks again.
You too. Thanks, Larry.
There you go. the great Dave Lombardi. He's a great follow on Twitter as well. Check him out. Dave does a great job. So there you go. Hopefully we didn't take too much of Dave's time. We hit a bunch of topics there. All right, let me do this. We got a bunch of people in the chat, a number of interesting things that people want to say. I'm going to put some of those up on the board. But first, let me thank our sponsors. At the bottom of the screen, you see our brand new sponsor, Marin Auto Glass. You're driving down the road, pebble hits your windshield, boom. You got a crack in the windshield, and it gets bigger, 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 bigger. What do? You call Marin Auto Glass, or you go to marinautoglass.com, or you give them a call at 415-883-3030. They come out to your house, or place of work. They pop out the old windshield, pop in the new one, glaze it all up, make sure that there's no glass sitting in your front seat, and away you go. Incredibly convenient. Give them a call. My good friend Saeed owns Marin Auto Glass. They've changed out my windshield, I would say 3 or 4 times. That's how many times I've had that happen to me. But very good company. We're also brought to you by New York Style Italian Sausage. Check them out as well. The best sausage in all of Northern California. And you can find them in any grocery store around Northern California. You name it, they're there. And the title sponsor of the Krug Show is Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California. And here's what they look like in Marin County. We'll be back in just a second. We'll read some of your chats next as we finish up on the Krug Show. All right, welcome back to the Krug Show. And, of course, we are also brought to you by New York Style Italian Sausage.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. You know, how can you go to church if you don't believe in God? You know, and along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. You know, it wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, you know, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, you know, that life is good.
All right, we're coming down the home stretch on the Krug Show. And once again, thanks to Dave Lombardi for hanging out and giving us his time. He was fantastic. Check out Pig and a Pickle. Check out New York Style Italian Sausage. And thanks to them for being sponsors of the Krug Show. All right, let's hit a couple chats here. Charlie Higgs says, "Congratulations, David, on the nuptials." There you go. Nicholas Parra, great job, Larry and Dave. Great show, amazing content. Okay, we got this one. Where is it? Here we go. Randy Daytona, Dave and Larry, the best. Jerry, the best. Jerry. Is that a Seinfeld? Charlie says, Dave's a playboy turned married man. All right, we got this one. Pig and a Pickle. There we go. And the super chat here from Michael Alanis. He says, last quarterback question, should Brock digress this year? I think he means regress because of his injury. Trey is traded and Sam is Sam. Do we go after Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix in the 24 draft? Well, if it's my vote, I'm voting for Michael Penix Jr. But I actually believe if all these quarterbacks fall on their face this year, get ready for Kirk Cousins. I don't think the Niners will go into the draft. I think they will go into free agency, and Cousins could be staring them right in the face. So if everybody falls on their face, get ready for Kirk Cousins. As far as Michael's question, though, UW's Michael Penix Jr. has a Mahomes-like skill set. He's athletic, he's fast, and he has got a laser. I mean, I watched them at the end of the year. Was it the bowl game? I forget what game it was. But Washington was playing on a day where they were up in Seattle, and I think there was like 45-mile-an-hour winds, and this guy was just throwing lasers, and it cut right through the wind. I mean, it was one of the most impressive passing days I think I've ever seen. Penix Jr. has an absolute Joe Flacco, young Terry Bradshaw. I mean, he's got a top-of-the-scale arm for sure. So I like Bo Nix. He's nice, but come on. Michael Penix Jr. is ridiculous thrower of the football. Two graybeard hairs make super chat. Larry, important question of the day. Marvel or DC? Marvel. We got this one from Bomber T. UC Davis, number 1. My daughter went there. My wife went there. Both my sisters went there. And all I'll say to it is screw UC Davis. Go Sac State. Sac State, I think, did beat Davis in the Causeway this year. You're misguided. This fan base wanted Fields, got Lance, and now they're stuck with Purdy, who won't get it done like Jimmy. Why is everybody so negative on Purdy? Purdy has been nothing short of miraculous. To rip Purdy at this point is inexplicable. Lazy television. Just wait for the Darnold hype when they start running padded drills. A mega talent vet, less than 2 years older than Trey, versus an injured dunk and dunk, or Trey, who doesn't run the offense well. I think you mean dink and dunk. Once again, somebody else taking a shot at Brock Purdy, who's never lost a game that he started and finished in the NFL. Joey Nichols, we cutting Mooney? No, they're not cutting Mooney. Larry taking his spot, Krug Island. Yes, I'll man the corner. Could you imagine how disappointed Niner fans would be if they saw me suiting up, walking towards the line of scrimmage on the corner? Oh, man. Charlie Higgs. Krug Island sounds awesome. Oh, man. We got this one from Joey Nichols. Larry locking down his side of the field. New Dawn Red October. My fat ass was sitting outside pulled pork sandwich. My fat ass was sitting outside pulled pork sandwich amazing. There you go. Talking about pig in a pickle. Gotta love pig in a pickle. Let's see. Got this one a couple times in the chat. Mike Fuss. He wants this out there. Larry, David, your show should be called Curb Your Enthusiasm. You trying to say that we're kind of low key? We're not telling lots of jokes. Mike, do you need more jokes? Joey Nichols says he's about to have 187 saying LK dog. By the way, we are closing in on 20,000 subs. And I've been saying that for a few weeks, but we are sure enough closing in on 20,000 subs. Let me give you the exact number when it pops up here on my phone. But yeah, if you go to thekrugshow.com, you can buy merchandise. If you buy any merchandise from thekrugshow.com link, I'll make you a personalized video. Just tell me a little bit about yourself, leave a comment, and I'll do a little personalized video. I figure I owe you that much. If somebody's going to go on to the Krug Show and then actually order a T-shirt, a sweatshirt, a hoodie, whatever it is, I feel like that's unbelievable support of the channel, and I feel like you deserve a personal mention. So that's what we're doing. Anybody who buys any merch, as my 14-year-old would say, will get a personalized Krug Show message. Gregus Khan says, when you get an intruder, you want a Ruger. When you need 49er information, you want a Krueger. All right. Might have been a stretch. Randy Daytona, best part of the show. Here we go. Nick J. Yes, Larry. That was Kenny Banya from Seinfeld. It's the best, Jerry. Hey, Nick J., can I tell you my Kenny Banya story? I'm in Vegas for a fight probably at least a decade ago. and it's at the Mandalay Bay. And so my buddy goes, "Oh, dude, I saw you walking in the lobby, and I didn't know you were here. You got to come have a drink with me." And I'm like, "No problem. I'll meet you in the lobby." Okay, I go down to the lobby, and he's like, I said, I'm like, where are you? I don't see you. He's like, I'm in the club, and I guess there's 2 clubs in the lobby. So I go, which club? He's like, it's the Rum Jungle. So there's a huge line for the Rum Jungle, and but I got my KMBR credential with it was a De La Hoya fight or maybe a Bernard Hopkins fight. I forget exactly who was fighting that weekend. And I had the credential because I had been doing the media stuff. The guy sees me. I said, "Is this the line to get into this club?" And he looks down at the credential, and he's like, "Oh, Mr. Krueger, come right in." And now I'm like, "What? How's this guy even?" I didn't even know I had the credential still on. And I'm like, "Oh, well, thank you." And I'm like, "Do you even know me?" And he's like, "No, but I saw your credential, and we were told to treat people who are here covering the fight very, very well." I'm like, "Awesome." So now I skip this line and I get into the Rum Jungle, and it looks like a cool place. It's got it's like a rainforest purple deal, and there's like water falling everywhere, and it looks like a scene from like a Disney Jungle Book movie or something. It's green and purple, and there's all kinds of music going on. I go up to the bar. He's like, "I'm at the bar." I go up to the bar, and I'm sitting there. My buddy orders a couple drinks. We're waiting at the bar, and all of a sudden, this jackass spills an entire shot on my forearm. And I just gotten there, and I'm like, "What the fuck?" And I turn around, I look at the guy, and I'm kind of pissed off because he just dumped a shot on my forearm. And I'm like, "Bro." And he turns around, it's that guy. It's Kenny Banya, whoever the actor is who plays Kenny Banya from Seinfeld. And and I looked at him, and I'm like, "That's gold, Jerry, gold." And now the guy goes from like, I'm sorry, to smiling. I recognized him. And he's like, "Let's do a shot. Let's do a shot." I'm like, "Let's do it." And I go, "What are we going to do? Goldschlager?" Just because I just said, "That's gold, Jerry, gold." And he's like, "Yeah, let's do some Goldschlager." He's like, "Bartender, get me a couple Goldschlager shots." And sure enough, me and Kenny Banya at the bar slamming Goldschlager, which is not a great drink, by the way, not a great shot. But there's my Kenny Banya anecdote. Who knew that I would have a Kenny Banya anecdote? Waveware says Vish is going to pop a blood vessel from disagree-itis later on. Oh, yeah, later tonight, by the way, 6:45 tonight, we're going to do a monster stream on the Niners. Jesse Naylor is back from Costa Rica. Jesse, me, and Vish. And I think it's going to be a combo platter on all of our channels, or maybe it might just be on me and Vish's channel. I'm not really sure. There's a huge text strand going back and forth. We'll figure it out. But 6:45 on the West Coast, 9:45 on the East Coast tonight. Do not miss it. Roughly 3 hours and 15 minutes from this moment. Me, Vish, and Naylor. Mono a mono. And we'll break it all down. Now we all get along real good, but I'm looking forward to that. I haven't done a 3-man show like that in a while, or if I have, I can't remember. I mean, I've done like 6-man shows, but never with guys who have their own audience, their own channels, and all that. Well, I've done some basketball, but nothing quite like this. So check it out tonight. 6:45 West Coast, 9:45 East Coast. Vish, Naylor, Krueger, talking Niners. Sports House says, "Awesome show, Larry, here for the chats." Glad to hear it. Charlie Higgs says, "My ex went to UC Davis." You know what? I've never met anybody who went to UC Davis that didn't like it. My daughter was debating between UC Davis and USF. And because I'm kind of a cheap ass, I was like, well, not really. I'm not really a cheap ass. But because I was trying to save a few bucks, I was like, "Hey, Davis, let's go Davis." Yes, UC over USF and the expensive tuition. But really, I just wanted her to be in a college town. And think about it. How many college towns are there on the West Coast? There's Davis, Cal Poly, Chico. Where else? I mean, where else would I know UOP's in Stockton, but that's not a college town. Obviously the LA schools, but that's not a college town. San Diego State, that's not a college town. These are big cities. The only real West Coast college towns are UC Davis, California, San Luis Obispo, and Chico. So I said, go to Davis. She went to Davis. She got her nursing major, or I forget exactly what her major, but now she's in nursing school. And she loved it. She loved it. So once again, I've never met anybody who went to Davis who didn't say they liked it. When I went to Sac State, we would go to Davis to party when we were tired of partying for real and we wanted a little bit more of a casual party. So we'd party up big on Thursday and Friday night, and then it would be like Saturday night, be like, hey, you guys want to go down to Davis? We're like, what the hell? Yeah, we'll go down to Davis. But it was always very, very cash. Davis is just a very low-key place for sure. Bomber T, look at the Causeway Classic record, Larry. We own you. Thank Jim Soker for that. If my good friend, one of my best friends in life, the late Bob Mattos, was here, he'd have a comeback for you because he was the head coach for Sac State forever. All I'll say to that, Bomber T, is look at the last 20 years and then come back to me. Get your facts and then come on back to me. It's my Jim Calhoun. But, Davis dominated under Jim Soker for a long time. And that's why that number is probably still in their favor. But in the last decade or so, Sac State, baby. I think Sac State's pretty much had the upper hand. Charlie Higgs says Krug Island is crazy. Randy Daytona, great show name. Great show name. Okay. Let's see. New Dawn Red October. You would make an awesome right tackle, Larry. Thank you. You know how disappointed people would be if they saw me out there? Our starting right tackle is 6'1", 235 pounds. What? Get him out of there. Where's McKivitz? I actually personally don't think McKivitz is going to be a downgrade from McGlinchey. I think it's one of the more overrated talking points around the Niners. I don't think McGlinchey was that great. I don't think McKivitz is that bad. And I don't believe the people who say that the Niner offensive line is somehow some weakness. I really don't. Trent's damn good. The guards are solid. The center was a Pro Bowl alternate. You got Feliciano backing up. You got some nice backups. Now, they're a little thin at tackle. There's no question. It would be nice if they had one more tackle. But other than that, I like the Niner O-line. And look around the NFL. How many teams are entering camp with a question about one guy on their offensive line? I would say almost everybody. Even the Eagles, didn't they lose their guard? So, I mean, everybody's got somebody new for the most part. I don't. And then the Niners also have CFO, Chris Forster, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in the game. So I'll take depth and a really good coach, and a premier left tackle. I'll take that any day of the week. And once again, I mentioned this to Dave. Niners O-line was second best in pressure rate allowed last year. Niners O-line ranked 5th in Pro Football Focus's pass blocking efficiency grades in 2022. 5th in the league. So before you crap on the Niner O-line, get your facts. No, I'm just joking, but you know what I'm saying. I think their O-line might be a little bit better than people think. Carlo P says Larry's stories are the best. Oh, thank you, Carlo. They're all true. Another Randy Daytona. Banya is huge, though. I didn't think he was that big of a guy, to be honest. I mean, I'm 6'1.5", 6'2". This guy might have been a little taller, but he's pretty skinny. David Mooschek says, Larry, that is a gold memory for sure. Gold, Jerry, gold. I always loved how Jerry just hated Banya. Thought he was a hack. We got this one from Waveware. I love Vish, by the way. Oh, who doesn't love Vish? Vish said something to me the other day, made me laugh. He's like, I blocked a guy on Twitter for the first time. I'm like, this is the first time? You got to be kidding me. I'm not Kawakami, but I'll block. More than anything, though, there's a lot of people who mute I don't mute. I'm more of a block guy. There's a couple people I really wish I hadn't blocked. I just muted. And then I go back and just mute them after I realize that they're going to be jerk offs for being blocked. That's when I just say, you know what, mute, because typically I like that confrontation. I'd rather block and have the person know that I'm pissed at them than mute them. Muting seems like the ultimate sorority house crap. Doesn't that seem like passive aggressive weakness right there? I muted you. You don't even know you've been blocked. You've been blocked in my mind, but you actually think you still exist, but you don't. To me, if you're a man, you block. If you mute, it's kind of weak. The guy that I did mute, I even didn't feel good as I hit mute. I'm like, I'd rather this guy know that he's blocked. What the hell? We'll just mute him. Always Drip 805. Do a 4-man show with Grant. I think Grant is in. Isn't Grant in the Hamptons? I think Grant's in the Hamptons. I contacted Grant earlier this week and I said, hey, you want to stream? And he's like, I'm out of town this week. Let's do it next week. So, and people, here's one thing that I don't want to see. I realize there's all these people that have their favorites and this and that, and we're all like flavors of ice cream, and there's people that hate me, and there's people that like me, people that like Dave, people that hate Dave, people that like Grant, people that hate Grant. Let me just say this. I judge everybody on the surface for who they are. And I know Grant, and Grant's a good guy. And when the lights aren't bright and nobody's watching, that's a good guy. When I lost my gig on the radio and I'm sitting there going, what do I want to do? Do I want to move? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? He's like, hey man, I admire what you do. I admire who you are. Let's go have some lunch and let's talk it over. And then we went out and we talked and he said, hey, look, I don't know what direction you're leaning in, but I think you ought to go this direction. And we talked. And when I was at my most down moment, he picked me up. And when I was feeling the worst about my career, he made me feel good and gave me kind of a shot in the arm and kind of inspired me. So if you put anti-Grant stuff in my chat, I'm either going to laugh or just ignore it. I realize he's a polarizing guy. He's got some polarizing opinions. That's not who he is. Who he is a kind-hearted, good person. And I've expressed that to him directly. I've expressed that to Lowell, and that's how I feel. So I just, I get it. He said something you disagreed with. He came across as arrogant, whatever it is. I get it. Believe me, I get it. But I'm just not with you. You know what I mean? To me, you're defined by how you act when the cameras aren't on. He knew that me being on radio and that I would probably over time build this channel up and maybe get to a pretty high level. But he wasn't like, oh, I don't want anybody in my space. It was like, hey, man, I care about you. And this is what I would do if I were you. And this is what I'm doing. And this is how it's working for me. And he was just, very generous. So I will not turn on him. I will not. I've had radio program people say to me, well, you're not going to have Grant on and like try to make me turn on him. And I'm just not doing it. I'd rather not be on the radio than turn on him. So that's just the way I feel. And I'm true to, if you're a friend of Larry Krueger, I'm a friend of yours for life, not just when things are good. So I respect the hell out of him. And so I don't want to hear, I get it. Believe me, I do get it. And there's lots of people that hate me. And I get that too. But all I got to say is, to me, he's a good guy. And there's almost nothing you can say in a chat that's going to make me say, oh, that's it. I hate Grant. No, it's not happening. Dan says, Larry, my daughter's a grad student at Davis and loves it. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry at all. Okay. Let's see. We got this one. Always drip 805. Everyone says they hate Grant Cohn, but probably watched the stream when Kinlaw came on. Well, I mean, that's the other thing too. I mean, so that blew up, but I mean, that was a communication between two people. I mean, and they talked it out. That's sometimes happens, right? People get emotional. And I think it's just one of those things. It's somebody else's battle. I won't get involved, but I'll say this: I've interviewed Javon 2 or 3 times, and you can go look at those interviews on the channel. And I've always found him to be really, really, very reasonable and balanced. But he lost it in that interview for sure. J Tan says Vish versus Larry 2. Yes, that'll be tonight. Don't miss it. Me against Vish. Vish against me. Jesse against Vish against me. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. Talk to Jesse. Jesse, I'm sure, will be tanned up from Costa Rica. We got this one. New Dawn, Red October. You're right, Larry. Right tackles don't mute people. That's right. That's right. Charlie Higgs, real men block. That's me. Yes. Come on. I mean, would you rather be blocked or muted? Charlie Higgs says Grant is on Krueger Island. There you go. But no, I've had a lot of fun doing this, and I love that we're in this lane. You know what I mean? I mean, who wouldn't want to own their own channel? Who wouldn't want to work for themselves? I got a kid who plays high school baseball. I haven't missed a game since I started this channel. Why? Because if I want to do a show, I just schedule it around the baseball games. So I'm a season ticket holder at Northgate Baseball. And now that he's playing summer ball, I watch my kid pitch against he's 17. I watched him pitch against 19-year-olds at St. Mary's on Sunday. I mean, it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And at the end of the day, come on, man. At the end of the day, life goes by fast. And I got 4 kids, and they were babies, like literally 45 minutes ago. So if all I would say to anybody, I wouldn't advise anybody or give anybody any life advice. All I would say is you love your kids. Be there for all those moments. You'll never regret being at their games. You will regret not being there. And then they grow up and they move away, and it's like, come on, man. Let's keep everything in proper perspective. But it is awesome to watch your kids compete. The only thing I'll say is I didn't like swim meets. I mean, come on. And I didn't like swim team. People in the burbs. I grew up in the city. People say, who do you swim for? We swim for a dime at Larson Pool, and we're traumatized by what we saw in the locker room. It was like that was swimming as a native of San Francisco. Cold Saturday morning swim lessons, go to Larson Pool, pay a dime for swim lessons, parade around the pool in your trunks, and almost going to be knocked out because of the chlorine stench. In the burbs, swimming is like, who do you swim for? I swim for this club. I swim for that club. What's your time? What's your stroke? What's your this? It's like a much more happy existence. City swimming, not so much. Not so much. We are at 19,687 subs, trying to get to 20,000 before camp. Will we get there? We're 313 away from there. So we got about 350, 360 people in the chat right now. If you have yet to hit like and subscribe, please do. That will help the channel. If you hit like, it just helps the algorithm. More people find the shows. If you hit subscribe, you'll just get an alert. Make sure you hit that notification bell. Every time we go live, you'll get a brand, you'll get a little alert on your phone. Krug's going live on the Krug Show. And as far as what we got coming up tonight, as we said, 6:45, me, Vish, and Jesse. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., the great Jack Hammer will be in the house. Tomorrow night after the Giants game, Ned Colletti, former Giants assistant GM, former Dodger GM, is going to join me for post-game after the Giants game Friday night against I believe the Rockies. And then Saturday morning at 8 a.m., the coach is going to be by for Coach and Krug Part 3. So we're looking forward to that. And then we're chasing down an interview with Marcelino McCrary Ball. Talk to Marcelino's wife. Marcelino's going to be coming on in a not too distant future. Also, Larry Harris, the assistant general manager of the Warriors, is going to stop by. I don't just do Niners. I do Giants, Niners, and Warriors. So Larry Harris is going to stop by here in the next week. We'll chop it up on what they've done and their trades and their draft choices and what they got cooking. So a lot coming up on the channel. Appreciate every single one of you guys. Join me once again at 6:45 for the triumvirate of Jesse, me, and Vish. Until then, we're out.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah, we ain't never fall back.